Stocks, bonds, ETFs, straight out of downtown Chicago. This is Zacks Market Edge.
Welcome to Zacks Market Edge, the podcast about investing in your life. I'm your host, Tracy Reinick, and this week I'm here to talk about a key subject that's come up in my Twitter feed recently, or X feed as it's now called, and it is Eli Lilly a bubble? Should we be buying this stock? I covered this already with NVIDIA and had this nice discussion about whether or not that was a bubble, but Eli Lilly's chart is going straight up kind of similarly to NVIDIA, and it has a high PE as well, and it looks kind of pricey. Is that a bubble here? So I wanted to dive in because this is something that we've all been talking about. And on Twitter, when we were discussing it, people immediately were saying, of course, it's a bubble, Tracy. Look at that chart. But as you know, the chart doesn't tell you whether or not it's actually a bubble. Just because a price is going up on some kind of asset doesn't mean it's a bubble. You have to have these other factors. And we talked about them on the podcast about NVIDIA. One of the key factors is speculation. Is there speculation around this stock? Are people buying it basically sight unseen? Am I getting questions from my relatives like I have been recently about NVIDIA, about whether or not they should just buy Eli Lilly? Are people buying it without knowing what it does or makes or how it earns revenue? Is there any kind of fraud associated with it? Because fraud can be a sign of bubbles. And, these are some of the key themes that we have with bubbles. Also, another one is that it will keep going higher and going up and maybe never retrace back down. That's also another key theme, is it's basically a sure thing type of stock. But let's take a look at one of the key areas that we looked at for NVIDIA, and that is actually at the fundamentals. That's where we're going to turn to first. What do the earnings look like here? What does the sales look like? Is that showing anything that's just a little bit too speculative and that could fit into the parameters of a bubblicious type of scenario? So I'm going to look on Zacks.com, of course. I already put in the ticker. And for those of you listening, you can get the video podcast on YouTube. So go over to YouTube. You can get on our YouTube page at Zacks.com/YouTube, or just put in Zacks Investment Research into the search bar and you'll come up with our channel there. And so you might want to tune in, but I'm going to do the best I can for all of you who are just listening in. So I went to the detailed estimates page because that's my number one go-to. And scrolling down, you can see the PE is at 63. Now, what is the Zacks rank? Zacks rank is a 3, which is the hold. Most stocks are in the 3s. That's nothing unusual about that. But earnings coming up on August 8th, we have the earnings on Zacks.com. And so the rank will change when the earnings come in. And a lot of stocks just kind of fall to the number 3 category ahead of an earnings report, especially a big cap like Eli Lilly. So this is all about the weight loss drug story, but Eli Lilly does have other drugs, both out there in the market and in the pipeline, including the Alzheimer's area. But it's really being fueled right now by their weight loss drug. So earnings, got to scroll down. You can see the earnings estimates expected to be up 116.9% this year, another 41% next year. So last year they made 632. This year they're making 1371, or at least that's the estimate, and 1942 next year. Of course, this is all subject to change, and we're going to scroll down and we can see some changes to the estimates now. So this is a little interesting. 2 estimates are down for the full year in just the last week. None have been raised, and it's kind of mixed for the quarter, which is coming up. One is cut and one is raised in the last week. So the analysts are making some adjustments on the earnings estimates. And then scrolling down, it's not a big adjustment. It's 1371, as I just mentioned. That's down from 1372. And same with the quarter, 266 down from 267. So just a few analysts maybe, coming to terms a little more information coming out there. So we have had some news on the weight loss side recently, and it does impact Eli Lilly. They did just recently get approval to sell the drug, the weight loss drug in China. And I didn't realize it was already, various of these weight loss drugs are already approved for the diabetes over there, but now they are approving them for the weight loss. And China, apparently, according to Reuters, is one of the largest countries in the world with the obesity problem. Obviously, it's one of the largest countries. So, that plays into it because we're just talking about sheer numbers. But this is a market that any of these companies that are making this drug want to be in and want to be in like desperately. So it did just get approved. Unclear when they're going to start to roll it out there as weight loss. Their competitor, Novo Nordisk, is also been approved in China. So they're already in the game over there too. So that's the other big story with these weight loss drugs and with all of these companies that are producing them so far is that there is competition. There isn't just Eli Lilly. It hasn't cornered the market on it. And so there is choice out there. There's also other companies that are trying desperately and quickly to come up with the pill version, as these companies also are. So right now it's just injectable. That's, as we know, not as pleasant an experience as actually just taking a pill. So everybody's racing to try to get the pill format out there and thinking they could take market share that way. So there's a lot of things brewing. And that's also why a lot of people are like, it's a bubble, Tracy, because all of these things are up in the air and nobody has a for sure thing cornering this type of market for the weight loss drugs. But this market is enormous. So anyone who's in it is going to see the revenue gain, is going to see the earnings gains, and nobody's complaining about it, right? So if you suddenly have a 30, 40, $50 billion market or bigger, and you are now getting 30% or 20% of it, that's pretty impressive. Again, especially considering kind of the slow pace of drug development over the last 20 years. There hasn't been a lot of big blockbuster drugs that are bringing in big streams of revenue like this one is doing right now. So these are things also to keep in mind. But let's look at what this looks like on the chart. So we've already talked about the high PE. It's PE of 63. That's actually come down a little bit as the earnings have risen and as the stock has pulled back off of its highs. So it's no longer hitting new highs on a daily basis. So let's take a look at the price and consensus chart. That's where the earnings consensus is depicted. But you can see it has had that pullback. But in the 5-year chart, it doesn't look all that dramatic, right? As it does on like a 3-month or a 4-month. But it has pulled back off those highs. So that's where we get a little bit lower on the PE. Now, this one has had periods where it's kind of just moved sideways here in 2023. And this is after the weight loss drugs were introduced to the market, the earnings were rising. And then even earlier here in 2024, you can see it kind of moving sideways there. So that's a positive thing. When you get the bubblicious type of chart, you get no pullbacks and it just kind of keeps going up, up, up. And that's where the speculation kind of comes into play. And I'm not really seeing it quite as much here. Now, would I like to see it retrace back down here to the lows from earlier in 2024 before this big upturn here? Sure. Because if I'm going to buy this stock, I want to get it as cheap as I can. And so I'm definitely getting those earnings cheaper there. But I would also probably like to wait for this next earnings report to see what is happening with all levers of the business, and including what is going to happen in China when they do roll out the weight loss drug there. So I'm sure they're going to get questions about all of this. Plus, there are other drugs, as I mentioned earlier, things going on with those. So there's a lot of balls in the air for Eli Lilly. We're going to find out more on this next earnings call. So a lot could happen with the changes in the earnings here. But this chart, and even with the earnings growth and the tremendous over 100% we're expecting for this year, is not giving me the vibes of, this is outrageous and people are piling in for no apparent reason. And it's only going up based on momentum, and everyone is talking about it. It's, talked about every day on all the financial news shows, and strangers are coming up to me who don't own a single stock asking me about it. No, none of that is actually happening. So to me, I feel like Eli Lilly is still in kind of the first few innings of maybe what is a bull market, obviously, from the chart, but hasn't yet gone into that bubblicious phase where everyone has to own it in their portfolio and every portfolio manager has to own it. That's the next key area that the stocks can go into. And you see a 1990s scenario where all the managers had to own Cisco in their portfolio in order to try to beat the indexes. And I think right now you don't have to own Eli Lilly in order to beat the indexes. But if you do, you're doing pretty good for yourself over the last 2 years. So the 2-year stack, it's up 168%. 1 year, it's up 90%. So it's, that is very bullish, but a bull doesn't mean a bubble. But I wanted to look at its competitor, Novo Nordisk, which is much more focused on the weight loss drugs because it's such a big provider of the diabetes drugs. And that's how this all came about. So they had first in along with Eli Lilly, but definitely first in, ticker is NVO there. They are overseas, and this one is cheaper. Look on the quote page, we're getting a forward P of just 39. That seems dirt cheap after just looking at Eli Lilly, right? And we're getting a PEG ratio that's not too bad at 1.3, but that's because these earnings have got to be rising as well. So let's take a look at those detailed estimates here. The sales estimates look very similar to what we just saw with Eli Lilly, about 25% this year, 24% next year. Those are great numbers. But look at the earnings, not quite as dramatic, just up 25% for 2024 and then another 28% for 2025. Still very attractive for any drug maker to have this kind of earnings growth, but not 100% as we've been seeing with Eli Lilly. Estimates, they are actually down on this one too. One has been cut in the last week for the full year and for the upcoming quarter. Nobody's raised. It's when I see something like this, I like to think it's probably the same analysts kind of adjusting their estimates ahead of the earnings reports. And I'm scrolling up because I want to see, we have expected earnings on 8/8. That's the same date as on Eli Lilly, but it's not actually confirmed because we don't have it like with the asterisks here. But it's coming in early August as well. So we're waiting on the earnings for this one as well. But that one lowering hasn't done that much for the full year, 338 versus just 340 7 days ago. So this one's fallen 2 cents. Eli Lilly fell 1 cent, and they made 270 last year. So they're at 338. But I'm curious what this price and consensus looks like, because it's not quite as crazy as the other one, but still, like I said, really attractive. So it's up and to the right, but not quite as big a gains. But the stock is also up and to the right, but not as dramatic as Eli Lilly either. So 1 year up 61% versus the 90% for Eli Lilly, and 2 years up 133%. But it too has had a little bit of a pullback off of these highs, fallen back a little bit recently ahead of this earnings report, and could be a little bit more of a buying opportunity here as well. Now, Novo Nordisk has the two bigger names, as I like to think of them, the ones I've always see the ads on, Ozempic and Wegovy. But again, is a lot of competition out there, and we are going to see it with these other companies coming out with the pill. All of these, Novo and Eli Lilly, also trying to develop the pill because, they're not dumb. Everybody wants the pill, but can they get it out there? Will it work as effectively as with the shots? Nobody knows, but everybody's trying. So is this one a bubble? This doesn't seem as bubblicious, and I don't know a single person that's asked me about Novo Nordisk. They don't even know what it is, even with this kind of performance on the stock chart. So I would say Novo is not in a bubble. And I've already said Eli Lilly is not in a bubble as far as I'm concerned either. But, once it gets that speculation, then I may change my mind. But the speculation just isn't there, not yet. It can, in these circumstances, happen kind of quickly with these companies as the general public kind of figures out, like, hey, I've started taking these drugs, who makes them? And they start diving in. And then the stock up at no matter what the price. But again, we have seen some of these timeout periods with these drugs. So Novo Nordisk on this chart also had a timeout at the same time Eli Lilly did at the end of 2023. And then it's been kind of fit and starts here in 2024 while still making the new highs. This seems healthy to me. And so does Eli Lilly. So sorry for those of you who think, oh yeah, it's a bubble. If you're a value investor, it may seem, way out of your reach at these valuations, but this is kind of standard for a growth stock and one that is in the hot area. We haven't seen a hot area, as I mentioned, in big pharma for a long time. You have to go back a couple decades since we've seen something this groundbreaking for these companies. And so it's kind of nice to see. And I think a lot of people aren't prepared for it. And that's why they're immediately just calling it a bubble. But I would be selective. Wait for pullbacks. You're always going to get them. We've already had pullbacks in the other hot stocks like NVIDIA and the AI stocks. So that's all good and healthy for this market because after all, who wants it to be in a bubble? Bubbles usually form at the end of bull markets. And who wants this bull market to end? I certainly don't. So I'm not looking for the bubble. But when it gets there, will we know it? I think we will have better idea when it's there. But I'll know it when I start getting, questions on Twitter about whether or not they should be buying Novo Nordisk right now. And I'm really not seeing that at all. So Novo Nordisk, ticker NVO. That's the cheaper one at 39 times. And then we have Eli Lilly at 63 times. But both should have very interesting earnings reports coming up and do a deep dive, figure out what else is driving their earnings because it's not just the weight loss. They have other things going on. So definitely do the deep dive before diving into any of these, as I always say. So again, the tickers for these, Eli Lilly is L as in Larry, L as in Larry, Y. Novo Nordisk is N as in Nancy, V as in Victor, O. And you can get them in other ways like ETFs and whatnot. But I know you all like the individual stocks, as do I. So keep your eye on both of these as we move along this year in 2024. Wait for your buying opportunities and we'll see as we move along, but no bubble for me on either one of these. And as always, I'm bringing you all this analysis on any of these types of bubblicious stocks. So far, I'm 0 for 2 on calling any bubbles on any of these because I didn't call one on NVIDIA yet either. And so who knows who will be next? Are there any other bubblicious stocks I should be covering? Let me know in the comments on YouTube. If you have questions about another stock you want me to look at to see if it's a bubble. But otherwise, send them to me on Twitter. It's just under my name at Tracy Reinick. And I will put one on the show because these are good questions to be asking. And it has been running for quite a while in this trade. So always good to keep an eye on valuations with these stocks. You could also get all of our podcasts on Apple Podcasts. We're on Spotify. We're on Amazon Music. Check out our other video podcasts and check out that NVIDIA is a bubble. It's only a couple weeks old. You can find that on YouTube as well. But get us somewhere, and I'll see you again next week with some more stocks.